I'm Victoria Cestaro. I work with Beth at NSFT, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. I'm counseling psychologist, but I also work at Anna Fruit Center and I teach an interpersonal psychotherapy. And part of the role is really, I spend lots and lots of time thinking about communication, which is the topic of today. So I'm going to hand over to Sue.
Hi, and I'm Sue Staff, and I'm a therapist also working for NSFT and been working with adults, and then most recent years been working with adolescents and young people. So really happy to be here today.
Thank you, Sue. So Ben, would you like to move? Yes, let's just start and just get a bit of a warm up. And we'll start as we are thinking about communication, and that's the topic, and that's what we're going to be thinking about in this hour. So could you remember a situation where communication did not go well for you or your child, your partner, your friend, whoever, and what was missing and what was happening? So if you could just type some comments for us and just really think about that. Where did communication did not go well? What was going on? What was happening? What was missing? And we can just build on what we've built on earlier on. Mm-hmm. So everybody's busy typing away, I'm sure. Right, so what have we got? Getting very upset and shouting, saying things I didn't mean to in the heat of the moment. Dialogue was missing due to the pain at both parties. Misinterpretation of meanings, absolutely. Yeah, so no communication, it's really emotions. Struggling to process what I was saying. She got frustrated and stressed and emotional, and I felt I was pushing too much for an answer. So we needed to leave the house. Yeah, so there is a stress added to the situation. Didn't think before speaking. What I wanted to say came out as an order rather than discussion. Yeah, absolutely. Not reading the situation correctly, not listening, presuming, the problem. Yeah, misreading body language, getting it wrong sometimes, absolutely. Raising voices, talking over each other, trying to convince the other of our point and getting nowhere, convinced of one thing, and despite trying to explain, didn't want to hear it. Yeah. So a lot of emotions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. So let's just flip the coin and thinking about a situation when it went well. What was different about the situation? So we were moving from the situation we didn't go well, and we're going to think about what went well and what was different. Okay, relaxed and free to speak. Had time and space to listen to properly. I wasn't shouting how just upset I was. I wasn't showing just how upset I was, right? Absolutely. Avoided you, asked open questions and listened to response and didn't judge. Let her guide the pace and the topic. I was a lot more patient and let her take her time. Brilliant. How each side felt so we could understand where we were both coming from. Brilliant. How different from the situations where it didn't go wrong. Yeah, so a lot of time listening, open question, putting my worries aside and prioritizing the needs of the child. Absolutely. Realizing it's something that may seem minor to me as an adult, may be major. Absolutely. To life of child, speaking in a calm manner, getting down to child's level, even if they are a teenager, not talking over them. At least one of the participants is not too much in suffering, which makes it possible to go through. Absolutely. Beautiful.
Reflecting a little bit here that this really demonstrates that we know, a lot of us here are experts in knowing when it's going well and knowing what when it's not going well. And I guess that's one of the challenges of life, how difficult it is to be able to do some of this situation, some of this stuff in the context when we are really struggling.
Absolutely. And when emotions take over and we feel stressed and we haven't got time and we are rushing to work and we're rushing to, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and the last one, in situations of high emotions, what becomes especially important? So at a time when there is a lot of emotions, what became especially important for you? Myself, absolutely. Yourself as a tool. And we talk about being present and being calm and all of those things we've talked about. Yeah, struggling for self-control and being rational. Yeah, absolutely. And when emotions is high, yes, it's really hard to be rational and staying in control. The facial expression gives away, don't they? And the voice, yes, so it's kind of non-verbals as well as paraverbal is how we say it. What is our tone of voice? Thinking before speaking, absolutely. So we always say kind of sit on your hands before you say anything. Take a breath, take a breathing, respond before you react. Yeah, rather than react. Absolutely. Not be reactionary to emotions. She knows she has a safe place to go to get her thoughts together. Make sure I leave her for as long as she needs the space at her own pace again. And I have to allow myself to take that step back. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Emotions are very powerful, but they do come down. They have to come down. So they go up, but they have to come down. We have to restore ourselves back to the equilibrium. Yeah, but they're very powerful and very scary, but they go, they passed. That we make peace before we go to bed, even if the situation isn't resolved. We can be on the same page and continue. Right words, right time, sometimes less is more, absolutely. Take a breath, walk away if needs to be. How many times when I had a 2-year-old, I had to walk up and down in the garden just to calm myself down while she was with that before I responded and to really be helpful. Because they do, children do push our buttons and emotions can fly really high. Remaining calm and just taking a pause. Ultimately, I want my children to know I love them no matter what. Absolutely. Wow. What a lovely audience. Thank you so much for so much useful reflection and thought. So it is pretty much very much what we're going to be thinking about today. And lots of what you've already put will be including and thinking about in today's presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Sue, who is just going to talk about, introduce the kind of friendships and communication and why is it so important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you know, when you think about as a child growing up before adolescence, they're very dependent on their parents and their caregivers and go to them to problem solve if they need support, they need help, they need a cuddle, they just always come to that adult. But you know, reaching adolescent, boy, is there some changes going on. And one of the main functions of the brain in an adolescent is to become independent. And so what happens in adolescence is they change who they go to for that support. They start relating more to people their own age. And that's partly because they're also going through the same problems as they are. They can share experiences, they feel understood. And it's that sense of belonging about talking with somebody who is kind of going through what you're going through. That is that sense of connection. And that's where we are still there in the wings, as it were, but actually it's all part of them branching out, becoming independent. And that's very, very important for them to do. Although we might all have the answers and we could tell them the answers, but actually it's part of their learning and their development as they're finding their way. And that's why it's so important for them to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. And it's really important for our children to learn the skills, to learn independence, to learn how to be with others and how to communicate, how to interact. But they are going to get it wrong, just like all of us get it wrong. And it's just one of the reasons why it goes wrong sometimes. So it was one famous psychologist who coined this term. It's called flipping the lid. And I'm just going to, I think if you can see, sure you can see my hand, I can see it on the screen. So basically, this is our brain. So all of our brain looks like this. And that means that this finger here, it's our emotional brain. So on the picture here is the amygdala. So it's the alarm center. And that emotional brain is very nicely wrapped up underneath the thinking brain. So my 4 fingers is a thinking brain, and that accounts for 90% of our brain. That part of brain only develops after birth. So very famous psychologist called the little infant unfinished brain or unfinished fetus. And the reason is that they just would not be able to pass through the birth canal because the brain would have been too big. So anyway, that brain develops after birth and develops from relationships and from a good communication and interactions. But what happens sometimes, and that's for all of us, this happens. Yeah, so it's called flipping the lid. So that means anything could trigger this. Stress, shame, vulnerability, emotions, upset, difficult day, tiredness, anything can trigger the flipping the lid. And that means when the lid is flipped, then we are really vulnerable because that part, the emotional brain amygdala, the alarm center, dictates and guides the behavior. And hence it's driven by the emotional brain rather than thinking brain. And at that moment, there is nothing anyone could do. We just need the brain to close down. So that's why when the emotions are high, it's not that useful to communicate because it's just the emotion that guides the behavior. And the teenagers flip the lid a lot. All of us flip the lid, but teenagers flip a lot, because the emotional part of the brain is very well developed. And the thinking brain is under reconstruction. And it takes up to age around 26 for the thinking brain to fully develop. So they're going to make mistakes. They're going to flip the lid. They're going to come back at home full of emotions, full of difficult emotions, could be exciting emotions, but difficult emotions. And really the part of the parent's job is to help them to close the lid and help them to model and be there, how to help them, to guide them to these really vulnerable emotions when the brain is kind of exposed. All right, so and hence today we're going to be talking about some of our tools. Sometimes we can't help it, the brain will just do that, it will flip the lid, and we can't prevent it happening, but sometimes we can prevent it, and sometimes it's about power of repair. So it's about just, in some of you, what you've said in the slides, how you can just sort of importance to calm down and come back to talk about and repair. And that's a really, really, really important tool. Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on next. So Bet, if you can move the slide, and we're going to show you the video when and just really to demonstrate a tiny bit how we all flip the lid. And in this example, it's when the parent flips the lid and the child flips the lid. All right.
Riley, I do not like this new attitude.
Oh, I'll show you attitude. No. Stay happy!
What is your problem? Just leave me alone.
Sir, reporting high levels of sass.
Take it to DEFCON 2.
You heard that, gentlemen? DEFCON 2.
Listen, young lady, I don't know where this disrespectful attitude came from.
You want a piece of this, Pops? Come and get it!
Yeah, well...
Here it comes. Prepare the foot.
Keys to safety position. Ready to launch on your command, sir.
Just shut up!
Fire!
Good job, gentlemen. That could have been a disaster.
Well, that was a disaster.
Okay, so this point, it's really interesting that at that point when the lid is flipped and emotions are really high, and if we were to measure them on emotional thermometer, it probably would get somewhere to the red, really high up. And at that point, nobody can effectively communicate at that point. So that happens to, this is common situation, it happens all the time, but it's about how do you understand it, how do you repair it, and here I'm going to hand you over to Sue so she can just guide you through what's going on in that clip, what's happening for a parent and child.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a model, an interpersonal model, and it's looking and becoming aware of what's going on for the parent and also what's going on for that child. So this will also be in your resource pack, but I'll go through some of it today. So for the parent, they're thinking, what is the problem? You know, their daughter wouldn't talk to them. You know, she needs to tell us what's going on. And mum was feeling quite worried, frustrated. And as you saw with dad, he was getting more and more frustrated. And then if we think of that young person, I mean, she just doesn't want to talk. You know, they don't understand. I wish they would just leave me alone. And she was feeling quite sad and quite worried. And actually, what happened was just as we've been talking about with flipping the lid, because the behavior from dad and also from this young person, they just both flipped their lid. You know, she, you know, hit on the table. He was really angry, shouting. And what happened was the communication just stopped. The emotions were so high that they were unable to communicate. And the young person wasn't ready to say what was going on. And the parent wasn't ready to listen. So what we will show you next is some tips to help manage a situation like this.
Thank you, Sue. So before we think about the tools and communication tips and what a good communication looks like, what needs to be there, let's just think about this situation. I'm going to give you a scenario which I would like you to think about, and I'll ask you some questions about it. So I'm just going to give you the scenario. So you've got your sort of preteen who is just getting ready to go out for her first party, and she's got this little crush on this boy from her school, and she really likes him and wants to impress him. So she talks to her best friend who lends her her favorite shoes. She really likes them, but they are 2 sizes too small. But she's saying, that's okay, I can just bear it, I can fit them, I can try to squeeze into them, and I'll really impress this boy, he will like me, and we will dance at this party. So she comes and tells this to her mom. She said, look, mom, I've got these shoes, and I'm going to go to this party. And mom tells her, well, you know, I don't think it's advisable. You're going to be in pain. They are too small for you. How are you going to dance? And comes up with all the rational advice as a parent, really looking out for her daughter. Daughter doesn't listen, goes to the party. Of course, her feet hurts, they swell up. She can't fit the shoes. She's in pain. So she sits all down at the table. The boy she likes go off with someone else who can dance and have fun. She's not fun, she's just sitting in a corner feeling sorry for herself, feeling really sorry for herself, cries, and all night feeling upset. And she walks home, comes to her house, and mom opens the door. She's all crying, she's feeling so vulnerable, she's so upset, she lost the boy, she's in pain. She opens the door, and we would like to really think about the situation. So if you move Beth onto the next slide, let's think about it. So when your young person is struggling, just like the example I've given you, how do you feel? How does it make you feel as a parent? So your child is really struggling. What is it triggering for you? What is it like for us as a parents? Puzzled, yeah. So we feel puzzled, we feel confused. Absolutely. Any other Feeling sad, guilty, scared for them, absolutely emotions, sad and concerned, sad, yeah, a lot of sadness, yeah, that they've had such a bad time and they were so looking forward to it, absolutely. So a lot of feeling upsetting and sad that I couldn't help, absolutely. Big one, isn't it? We like to be able to, if we only squeeze our children, and for children not to ever go through pain and sad, frustrated, confused. I can't exactly remember that feeling, very much that feeling ourselves, sympathetic for them. Absolutely. Yeah, lots of emotion and lots of powerless feeling as well. It's easier to deal with. I struggle more if it happens, reflects badly on me as a parent, if they are late to school or don't do homework. Okay.
Sorry, Victoria, this is the next question. Sorry, it flicked to the next one. So
okay, all right.
Now it's how might parents, if this is the scenario and they've opened up the front door to their daughter.
Brilliant.
It's not necessarily the perfect response you might give, but how might you respond? What might be your instinctual response in that scenario when you open the door and your daughter's come home upset and with her shoes in her hand?
Absolutely.
So you might have your ideal response and your real response. So share both.
Absolutely. So we've got, I find it easier to deal with. Yeah. So somebody said, I find it easier to, yeah. Hugs. Any other responses to the situation? Offer cuddles now and say, let's chat in the morning. It's hard not to say I was right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Oh no, what happened? You want to talk? Lots of TLC. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of feeling for the young person and offering sort of, yeah, it's a bit you're in pain. Can I help you to take care of? And I hope next time you probably could take into advice. Yeah. So a lot of the time our instincts initially so easy to just say, I've told you so. If only you listened to me, you wouldn't get into the situation, isn't it? It's kind of our natural instinct sometimes. That, and especially if emotions, especially if we are high, especially when we feel powerless. Yeah, absolutely. I think showing care and acknowledging it's been a tough evening, despite thinking this could have been avoided, but ultimately they will make mistakes and how to make own decisions. Yeah, absolutely. So children have to learn themselves, don't they? We cannot do that learning for them. We've done that ourselves. We've been through that learning. We can't take the pain away. They have to go through the pain to learn and connect to the feelings, what it feels like. But what we want to promote, if they do make mistakes, despite us telling them so, we want to be there for them and help to make it better, don't we? We want to encourage the communication. And I think it's very interesting that first response, which is, why didn't you listen to me? I've told you so. What does that do? That promotes disconnection, doesn't it? And whereas the response, oh, you poor thing. Oh, you poor thing. You are soaked. You are wet. You are upset. Look at you. Let me give you a hug. Come inside the house. Let me make you hot chocolate. And we can either watch a TV or we can talk about it if you want to, but let's just sit down and have a hug. You've been through quite an ordeal. You poor, poor, poor thing. And that response promotes connection. So a young person is much more likely to come and talk to you than disconnect and go to her room and not feeling understood. And I don't know, probably all of you can come from example, probably all of you have got people around you in your life who can do that for you, who can provide that emotional comfort, who can really get you, who understand what it's like for you, what is it like to be in their shoes. And it's the most delicious feeling, because when we feel understood by someone, we are much more likely to have a cry, we're much more likely to connect, and much more likely to talk once we calm down and express what we feel. So I'm just, before we start, I'll just give you a tiny little example of what happened recently with my daughter. She said really, she came home from school and she looked visibly upset, but she didn't say anything, I don't know, she just looked. But we know the mental states of others are opaque. We don't quite know what's going on for them. And she's opened the fridge and looked down, closed it again, really pushed it down and said, "Oh, there is never anything to eat in this house. You never cook, you never shop. Oh." And really there'll be blaming, shouting, and really quite a strong response. So that kind of response does trigger something for us as a parents. And I can't say it didn't trigger upset and sort of thinking, how dare she talk to me like a mother, is going to order her. But then, as we talked about, not responding and just taking a breath, you know, you're kind of looking, what's underneath that? Why is she saying like this? I know I'm a good parent. I do shop, I do provide food. So it's not through what she's saying. So what's behind it? So just take a breath, and I just calmed down, and I said to her, have you had a bad day? Or I wonder what's going on for you. Sounded like you've had a bad day. And she just went, "Oh, Mama, it's such a dreadful day." And that really allowed us to talk and communicate about what was really going on, rather than us getting heated into discussion about fridge and not enough food, or me being and blaming me, or me feeling as an inadequate mother. But it's really difficult to do, isn't it, when emotions are flying high and when there is such an expressed affect in a room. So we're going to move on next, Beth. And we are going to move in the next part of the presentation about the communication tools. What are those delicious, useful communication tools? So we're going to start with a little video for you to see.
Oh, the stuffed animal Hall of Fame! My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I are going to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time. We had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on, the train station is this way.
How did you do that?
I don't know. It was sad, so I listened to what...
Hey, there's the train.
Oh, we made it! We're finally gonna get home! Oh no, these facts and opinions look so similar.
Ah, don't worry about it. Happens all the time.
Every time I look at this video, I love it. It's beautifully demonstrate so many things, but how all of us can just really want to fix and makes it better. Just like the happiness in the little video. She tries really hard to cheer him up and say jokes and do everything to move away from his feelings. But while doing that, she wasn't connected with him because Bing Bong is really sad. He just lost something so important. And cheering up just doesn't work because they are on two different feeling state. They're not matching where they are at. So what the sadness did, she did something so beautiful. And so if you move on to the next slide, we're just going to, I'm going to show you the pictorial representation of what she did. So in order for the good communication to happen, there has to be certain conditions right. And we can't be you can't be downstairs cleaning the dishes or cooking potatoes and your child being upstairs playing, and for it to effectively communicate. It's got to be in a close proximity. You've got to be close to each other. So just like the sadness, just sat next to Bing Bong side by side. She held his hand. She looked interested. She was interested in him and his mental state, or in him, what was going on for him. He was sad. She was interested in his sadness. She gave him space. She turned, she said a little turn towards him. She was watching him and wondering what he might be going through. So she was saying, oh, you're sad. I wonder whether you're missing Riley. You've had really good adventures together. And next slide, Beth. She was really waiting for him to respond. She was really generous with her space. She wasn't just talking, she was waiting to what he said. And he said, yes, it's hard. We had breakfast twice one day. It was so lovely when we did that. There was real warmth in their response. She was listening actively. She was naming what she saw. She's had her tone of voice matched. It was kind of down, it was slow, it was kind. She was saying what she was doing, and she was really picking up on his initiatives. So what this means that she was waiting for him to respond. So she wasn't just saying things by herself. It wasn't just her responses. She was waiting for him. And I think these are really, really important steps. So if we want to effectively communicate with our children, we have to wait for their initiative sometimes. And sometimes what initiative means, it's not a big word, but it could mean anything. For smaller children, some of you have smaller children, could be that they lift hand, or they position themselves closer, or they look at you in a certain way. So it's not necessarily what they say. Sometimes it's the posture, sometimes it's nonverbal. And what you want to be curious to that. You want to be interested. So if a child doesn't speak or doesn't say anything, could pick up a ball, something, and you could just say, wow, you've got ball in your hand. It's just being really curious in what they are doing. And that's really encouraging togetherness, good communication. And the next slide, Beth. And just lastly, so sort of really being playful together and being friendly, really important. So really created safety in the relationship. And eye contact, so important, because eye contact, it's the looking at each other, it's your window to something what might be going inside. We don't know what it might be, but that might give us some clue, and we can wonder about it. And we can receive a word, something they say, we can repeat and say it and check. Is that right? Is that correct? So what I'm seeing is this, and show you've noticed something they've done. And once you've got these conditions met, these are the steps for a really good communication and for the closeness. And once you've got this, it's much easier than to discipline your children. It's much easier to put the rules and boundaries, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but these have to be there. We can't start with a boundaries setting or expecting our children to listen or come down for dinner at 5 o'clock or all the sort of rules or do the sort of homework and tasks, dishes and things like that. If we don't have these conditions in place, yeah, it's never going to work. So there is certain kind of prerequisites, there are conditions in order for us to effectively discipline our children and effectively communicate. All right, so I'm going to move over next. And next bit, I'm going to hand over to Sue, who is going to talk about 4 parent tips. These are the tips that are researched and used in many therapies, in parenting programs, and it's not to say that communication is going to wrong, because it is going to wrong, and we are looking for good enough. Good enough parents only get it right only 50 or 60%, I think it's even less, research says time, but the most important is the power of repair. So it is going to go wrong for all of us, but we can try, if you're applying this principle and these tips, we can try to really promote effective communication with our children. So I'm going to hand over to Sue, who is going to get you through those tips.
Okay, so we have 4 tips here. Consider the intention, not the outcome. Strike while the iron is cold. Be firm but kind, and put your oxygen mask on first. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. Consider the intention. You know, often what is going on doesn't match with what you see. And for our young people, with all of the changes that are going on, there might be someone that has a bad day at school, they broke up with friends, they just maybe didn't get the exam result that they wanted to. For a lot of our adolescents taking their exams, and actually it just doesn't match. So what would happen is they would maybe coming from school, they're in a really bad mood, they're just shouting, like Victoria said, maybe slam that fridge door. And what we have to really be mindful of is not to respond to how they're acting, because it could be very quick to respond to their anger, and then that communication will break right down. Whereas if we recognize that and actually can just step back from it and think, why is that happening? Why are they behaving that way? What might be going on for them might be really, really helpful for us, because we're looking at that from a different perspective rather than reacting to the emotion, which actually could then escalate the situation. And then again, the communication will not take place. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so in the most common scenario, you might have conflict with your child. What is often underlying it? So what do you think might be underlying the conflict that you might have had with your child? What is often underlying there? If you could maybe think about that and respond to that. Okay, what they want but can't have, absolutely. My child being overwhelmed by something, or me not being available, absolutely. My child, okay, so my fear for my child, fear is hard to handle, and it gets covered by, by anger, absolutely. The word no, yes. So my child not doing what has been asked, absolutely, multiple times, yes. Not eating meals. They feel like they are not being treated like a young adult. Boy, is that true. Our adolescents especially, they want to be the adult, don't they? And they want to be treated like an adult, but as we know, they aren't an adult yet. So absolutely. And the anxiety, I didn't mention that one, putting pressure on herself to be successful and to please. Great answers. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely, that is the case. So this really is about the communication, and strike while the iron is cold. Now, the thing is, if you think about when emotions are high and that person is maybe angry or upset, that could possibly trigger your anger because you're not getting the answer that you want. You want to know what's going on. And then you've got 2 people with high emotions, and actually that isn't going to get anywhere. It's just going to lead to more arguments, perhaps shouting like in some of the videos we saw earlier. And actually what we need to do is calm those emotions down, because if we can calm them down, that's when the communication can start. So often what we can do is maybe step away and then respond. So if you step away, perhaps you can, say to the young person, do you know what? I see there's something going on for you that's making you feel this way. Let's find a time when we can talk, and maybe find that time when you can, because at that moment isn't the best way or the best time to talk because the emotions are so high. But if you can go ahead and identify a time that you can meet, maybe after dinner, maybe when things have calmed down, come back again and sit down and discuss. Obviously, you would find then that, yes, because emotions have calmed right down, that communication will really improve. And it's letting the young person know too that you're not dismissing what's going on for them, but you're just recognizing that they're so distressed right now that they're not able to talk to you in a way that perhaps they'd like to. And it gives them a chance to reflect on what's going on and collect their thoughts and then engage in a conversation with you. So often it's good if we can just step away, and then when things have calmed down, we come back together and we start that communication.
And Sue, I have a confession to make. Often I have to be the one who has to step away, because I know that I've reached a point where I'm going to lose the plot. And my kids always say, you're always saying, you're going to lose the plot. And sometimes I have to say to my kids, I need to step away from this because I'm getting really worked up and I know that's not going to be helpful to anyone. So my kids have got used to me taking a step back now myself, which again is good modeling for them to learn that they can recognize when they're in that place that maybe what they need is some space, and to take a step back.
I think that's a really good point, Beth, because as adults, we all have emotions. They're not just adolescents. We all need to learn these techniques of how to manage our emotions. And absolutely, you're right. It's about modeling that and saying, do you know what? I feel this way. I need to take some time out for me, and then we will talk later. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so what's the worst scenario for you to communicate well? What's the best time? As I'm leaving the house is the worst. Absolutely. Or just before bed. Absolutely. You're not going to have the time, are you? Absolutely. Being too busy. Yes. Yes, that's very much so. If we're too busy, we just can't give the time, can we? Okay, my children like to talk when they are ready for bed, but I give them that time. Okay, absolutely. And you can, if you've got the time, that's when absolutely you can talk. And the worst time is trying to leave the house. Best time is bedtime. Yes, when I'm trying to concentrate on something or dealing with another child or issue, absolutely. That can be the worst time, can't it? Okay. And when I'm in a rush and my children aren't listening absolutely to your requests, usually trying to get out of the house when I have time, it's better. Absolutely. This is the whole point of making the time so that you don't feel rushed and then you get the result that you want. Absolutely.
I'm just thinking, Sue, about how we do that practically sometimes, because it is those critical times, and how we let our children know that this is important and we do want to talk about it. We can't do it right now because it doesn't make sense, and kind of earmarking a time so we can say, okay, right now I'm just leaving the house. I need to get you all out the door. So I promise that we'll revisit this tonight after dinner when we have that, when there's a safer time in the day when you can kind of commit yourself 100%. And initially your children might be like, protesting still or not really believe you, but if you're able to then follow through and remember that you were going to have this discussion then I think your children start to learn that when you say that, you do mean you'll come back to it. It's not just an avoidance tactic to not deal with it. So it kind of takes a little bit of practice and getting used to for your children, but it's definitely worth it, because then they again start to do, let's talk about that later tonight. Actually, yeah, you're right, Mum. So I think the more we practice this, and it feels a bit alien at the beginning, the easier it gets, because then our children feel they can trust us, and it's predictable.
Absolutely. And as this says here, trying to be available whenever they're ready to talk, but this is not always possible, which is what you're saying, Beth. Let them know I'm available and agree a time. Absolutely important. Yeah. And tired, hungry, busy, either me or the child. Absolutely. Thank you. Some brilliant answers there. This.
Sorry, so I just wanted to say that this is such an important skills to learn from us, because children learn from modeling. Children learn by watching us, and they learn by actually learn about other states as well. So sometimes when we are tired, oh, I'm so sorry, mommy is tired now, hungry, or it's now the right time, let's come back to it. And it's that kind of, you are that model to effective communication for them. So they are learning that from you. So it's so important, and perseverance, important tool. So I just wanted to say that.
No, absolutely. And again, you know, well, we should be firm and still be soft in the heart, be a saint and a soldier together, absolutely kind and firm. And, you know, it's important to discipline as a parent. That is our job. But it's also, we need to be understanding and validating of a young person, but not moving those boundaries. For instance, you know, today in the world of computers and phones and iPads and all things, children want to stay on those more and more. And if you let them, they'll stay on till way into the late hours of the night. And we know that they have to get up for school in the morning. And so it's really being firm and saying, yes, I know you're having a fun time. I know you're enjoying your game with your friends, but bedtime is at whatever time you've set that for. And that's what we need to stick to. And it's actually, it can be really hard sometimes, because it's nice to see your children have fun, especially if they've had such a hard day at school and they come in and they're sort of a bit grumpy, and then they've become quite happy and laughing. You think, oh, it's so nice to hear them laugh. You don't really want it to end. But it's actually, again, about modeling, saying, no, you know what, you need to go ahead and you need to be in bed by 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever that time is. And actually, this is where being a saint and a soldier, so you've got a soldier on there, you've got to hold those boundaries. And it can be so tempting to move those and say, well, do you know what? Yeah, maybe another hour, but that doesn't do any favors, because when has another hour always been enough? So it's really being firm and standing your ground with them and doing it in a very kind and caring way, which I'm sure you would do.
Yeah, and sorry, so can I just say that this is really hard, isn't it? Because we are so busy and everybody's got so much, life is so busy. And it's a tricky one, isn't it? But I mean, it always sticks in my mind that the amount of teenagers I work with who told me that I wish my parents stuck to what they said, and I wish no was no. Because it does make children feel safe. The boundaries make children feel safe in this very big, confusing, overwhelming world that we're all living in. So I just wanted to share that because it's such an important one.
It is. So can you think about an example? Oh, look, somebody's ahead of me here. Well done. Give an example of when you've had to be firm and kind. When it's bedtime, when I'm saying you have to come off your game. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. That is so true. Yes, a lot of games, isn't there? We are in a world of games and technology, aren't we? When she doesn't want to go after school activities as she's anxious, but I know how much she enjoys them, so I do insist she goes. Absolutely, being firm there, but knowing that when she gets there, she's going to be okay. Absolutely, very, very important to do that. And you putting your oxygen mask on now. If we think about that for a moment, if you've had a really tough day yourself and you might be quite stressed, you might be quite angry, irritated, just not in a good place. And then your young person comes in, maybe from school or somewhere, and they're not in a good place either. They're quite angry. Actually, at that time is not a good opportunity for that communication to happen. And it's really looking at your needs, what you can do to take care of yourself, because, you know, we have emotions too. Things upset us, and what are we going to do about that? And we need to actually look at who is there for us, who can we pull on for support from? And actually, if we take care of ourselves and we take care of our emotions, and maybe we talk to a friend, or we maybe talk to a neighbor or somebody just to share about what's going on for us, then that will calm our emotions down. And in return, we can then be there for our young person, because we're in a much better place ourselves and we're more able to respond to their needs and what's going on for them. So what can you do to help with looking after yourself? You know, if you're putting your own oxygen mask on first And if you were going through a difficult time, what could you do to take care of you? Oh, absolutely. More dog walks. Yes. Getting the dog out, getting outside, bit of exercise, get some fresh air and a break from it all. Absolutely. Yes. More time for me. Oh my gosh, don't we just? This world is such a busy world today. We do need time. Breathing exercise is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Wine. Yeah, I think we've all had a glass of wine. Asking for help instead of trying to do it all by myself. Absolutely. That's right. Reaching out to others and asking for help. A proper bath with no interruptions. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Bubbles and possibly music and candles. Yes. Eat well, sleep well. All important things, aren't they? Talk and meditate. Yes. I find yoga really helps, even just 5 to 10 minutes. Absolutely, it does. And it does free your mind and body. And asking for support. This is exactly, and this is kind of modeling again what we're doing for our young people. We're asking for support from other people instead of trying to cope all on our own, staying in that emotion. Asking my kids to help with tasks that I tend to get into the habit of doing. Yes, asking for their help. Talk to my husband first or a shrink. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
So that's actually the last
That is
slide.
the last slide there.
So we are 1 minute before the end.
Wow.
So we'd like to just check in with you guys about how helpful you found the session today. Again, that's really helpful because this is the first time we've run this session. Thank you again to Victoria and Sue for putting it together and presenting it so beautifully. So it's really helpful for us in terms of thinking about the content and the structure of the session. So thank you for your contributions on Slido as well today. It's really helpful. We use this feedback to really help us build our content. So the very final question from us is, what are the 2 things you're going to take away from the session today? And what we know is helpful about asking you about 2 things is, one, it's really great for us because it means if we ever have to condense this presentation down or move things around, they're the 2 things that if we get kind of unanimous, we often get quite a few people saying the same 2 things, then we'll keep those things in. But also it's really helpful for you because we know human beings, especially when you've had a lot of information, benefit from taking away 1 or 2 things that they can very easily and practically implement. My dog's like, that walk you mentioned, come on. He's just hassling me here. So thinking about what 2 things that you're going to take away or do slightly differently from tonight onwards, because you've probably all got bedtime ahead of you, is really helpful for you. It means you're much more likely to integrate and do those couple of things. So thank you again for your contributions tonight. We will be sending around the recording and any resources that might go with this, including the handout that Sue shared and all the PowerPoint presentations. So you can have another look through if that's helpful for you. And again, I think someone's mentioned about the oxygen mask. We can't underestimate, how challenging and exhausting and tiring it can be to be a parent. We're all grappling with our own interpersonal challenges, things that are coming up in our lives that we're trying to protect our children from. So it's a really tough job. But as we were talking about at the very beginning of this, it's a long-term investment in your children, and so sometimes you can feel like the rewards are limited, especially if you're going through tricky times with your child. But perseverance and again asking for help and support when you need it and looking after yourself and putting yourself first quite often is the beginnings of being able to do more of these things. So I wish you all well with that. We're running a workshop in March for teenagers. We would recommend you come along because we're going to show the other side of the coin. We're going to teach them the skills and techniques of communicating, which will help them get what they want. So it's a different slant, different sort of information. So please book onto that workshop on Eventbrite if you're interested in hearing it from the other point of view. And if you've got an adolescent or a young person, please encourage them to come along. It should be a really interesting session. So thank you again. And Sue, I know you've got to go.
Thank you very much.
So thank you again, Victoria and Sue, for this evening, your time tonight.
A pleasure.
It is absolute pleasure. Thank you.